We'll dismiss the kids to go to Kids Corner. It's good to see everybody this morning. This is one of our, I think, a lot of people are gone Sundays, which is fine. Good to see some of you back. It's hard to believe, and don't get mad at me, I didn't make the calendar, that this is the last Sunday of August already. September starts this week, which makes some of us very, very, very happy. I think a lot of people in here, fall is your favorite time of year, and it would be more your favorite time of year if you weren't just so aware of what season follows fall. But anyway, it's good to see everyone. We live today in a post-Christian era. That means that I can remember the days. I still like to think I'm not that old. It's getting harder and harder to do so. But I can remember growing up, not only did we not have Little League on Sunday, in my hometown, they didn't even have Little League on Wednesday because churches met on Wednesday. Now, we live in an era, post-Christian means all the assumptions that we once had are no longer shared by culture as a whole. And I think that's true. So, how do we share our faith in a time and an era where we don't share assumptions with most of the people we meet? And how do we share our faith without crossing lines or alienating people? That was the question someone asked. How do we do that? If we share our faith at all, some say that we're being less than inclusive. Who are you? You have no right to think that your faith is for me. How dare you share? Why do you think that your way is better? It's just one of hundreds of choices that we have. Even as what they aggressively push is in itself a belief system, just by a different name. Here's our issue. To even claim today that there's one way that might be better, stronger, superior, correct, is called non-inclusive. It has been said at times in my past that I'm a non-inclusive person, to which I say thank you. If Jesus is God, and if this Jesus rose from the dead, then we do have a very unique story, and we have a very unique claim. So how do we share the good news without crossing lines, and how do we share without offending? That still is a question. It may not be possible, but we should think about it. Steve Rossini will back me up on this. This was years ago. I told him we were up someplace, and I said to Steve, I was golfing with Steve, and I said, hey, we're going to be paired up with these two people. If sometime in the trip they ask what I do for a living, please don't say pastor. Say college professor. Because when you say pastor, they get weird. And there was once he let slip that I was a pastor, and they immediately got weird. Which means they immediately start apologizing for the next 45 minutes for the putter that they threw and all the profanities that came out of their mouth after they missed the shot. And then it gets strange for me. I'm just here to golf. If you want to come and apologize and confess, I can make an office appointment for you. But right now, that's not what we're doing, and it makes it very uncomfortable. But if it is possible to share our faith without offending, maybe we should think about it. And so I want to just go through a couple, maybe, texts today. First one is 1 John chapter 1, verse 3. What do I mean by sharing the faith? We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. Some of us remember the day when sharing our faith involved a pamphlet or a booklet or a story or a movie, or you set up a soapbox on a street corner with a bullhorn and you started talking. And there are, I think, still people that might do that today. Can I cautiously make the suggestion, not very effective? Think how many times, and they've closed, but just before they did, when used to, remember years ago, remember the previous generation, we had these giant enclosed shopping centers called malls. Remember that? All those years ago. And even then you'd walk, and if someone would be in a little kiosk in the middle and they'd jump in front of you and say, I have a free something for you. And you would run as fast as you could. You didn't want them bothering you. You didn't want anybody else encroaching. I'm there. I have a purpose. I'm here to buy pants. I got to go to the store and I got to get pants. I'm not here to get my eyebrows waxed. I'm not here to get a facial tattoo. I'm not here to get my ears pierced. I'm not here to get the skin cream from the Dead Sea in Israel. Am I covering all of them? You can't. I'm not here to do any of that. I'm not here for a cell phone case. And so we'd avoid. We used to take for granted that most of the world at least saw the world in similar ways than we do. I mean, most of the world would say, yes, there is a God. We believe in a God. Yes, Jesus Christ was God's Son. Yes, I probably should live better, but I don't. I know I should. That's not where we're at today. It's that I'm not sure there's a God. Where's your evidence? Jesus is just another guy, another one of the dead people from years ago, and who are you to tell me how I should live, and it's up to me, and get lost. Which is it's a different place. I want to start off by saying we should not lose any confidence. We have great ground on which to stand. Look at communities, look at places around the world, look at times in history when we have had no God. We talk about Nazi Germany in the 30s, and we ignore that you had like 30 years of philosophers and theologians from that part of the world that very much led exactly to where that society ended up. We have people today that say, if you look at survey after survey, one of the fastest growing groups is people who say that they're either atheist or agnostic. They don't think there's a God. One of the great pieces of ground that we have to stand on is if you look underneath the surface at science and that world, the atheists and agnostics are losing today. That world is very much recognizing what the church has said for our whole lifetime. Complete, random accident does not explain this world. Not only does it not explain this world, we have so many other steps you have to take. How do you explain life? I remember high school biology class. This was back in the black and white era. I remember high school biology, and they would tell you that there were, these tidal pools, superheated water, volcanic activity. You had this soup of amino acids and molecules floating around. And much like young Frankenstein, a lightning bolt, eureka, we had life created. The trouble is, try as they might, they cannot recreate anything even close to this. You don't have to explain life. You have to, the creation of the world. You have to explain how we get life from non-life. Then you have to explain, and every time you hear in the news, is there life on Mars? They're looking for some fragment of an acid that might have gone into a bacteria. Okay. You don't have to explain that. How do you get life that thrives? How do you get life that reproduces? Consistency. How do you get, and here's the last big step, how do you get life that is aware of itself as differentiated from others, as differentiated from God? You have years ago, they came to this newfound understanding. Even Einstein at the beginning simply said the world just simply is. The universe has always been. The universe will always be. It's called steady state. It just always exists. And then all of a sudden, everybody started doing the math, including Einstein's math, that he never quite believed where it ended up, and went, yes, your math is right, but your conclusions are wrong. Not only is the universe not have a forever existence, the universe had a definite beginning. And they called it the Big Bang. Almost like someone spoke it into existence. Here's the thing, though. With this huge explosion, see, if I dropped a paint can from the roof and watch it explode when it hit the ground, something tells me that there's not perfect mathematical formula that will explain the random splatter on the sidewalk. The result of this Big Bang is mathematical precision. Now, there's something called the cosmological constant. The cosmological constant is when something explodes, how do you get things? How do you get matter? How do you get molecules and atoms? And how do you get planets and stuff? And actually, if you do this formula, it's like, well, you'd have to have certain thing happen again and again and again for matter to happen. And it would have to be able to explain and have to be kind of in a steady state. And by the way, the odds of that are very low, like 1 in 1,000. Wow, that would be something, except it's not 1 in 1,000. What if it's 1 in 1,000,000? The top number, what if it's 1 in 1,000,000,000,000? And you go, wow, maybe there is a God. For something like that to have this cosmological constant that exists 1 in 1,000,000,000,000. Below that is 1 in quintillion. And I've never said quintillion publicly until this morning before. That's 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 zeros. The cosmological constant is the bottom number. 10 to the 122nd power. Anything greater than that, nothing would have existed. The Big Bang, the explosion, just would have just kept going and ripped apart. Anything less than that, it would have collapsed in on itself. That is, and maybe someone will want to screenshot this. If you're watching online, I think I have the right number of zeros there. It's a lot of zeros. 10 to the 122nd power. When you talk about the fact that something exists, that is how slight of a chance. We're not talking 1 in 1,000. We're not talking 1 in 1,000,000,000. We're not talking about 1 in quintillion. We're not even talking about a gazillion. We're not even talking about that. Some of you got that very poor, terrible pop reference. Maybe with something that rare, it's been called, it seems that our universe is fine-tuned for creation. For something to exist where nothing did before. That's the odds. In every single one of our cells is genetic code. In every single cell in your body, you have 6 feet of DNA. And there's a DNA strand that has these markers on it. There are, whatever that number was before, there's even a higher variation for all that 6 feet, all the possible combinations. And even Bill Gates has said, this whatever we see in DNA, this is the most advanced code that anybody's ever seen, more than we could ever devise. This code gives information. This code tells a cell what it does, when it does it, how it reproduces. And by the way, in the gazillions of combinations, there's only a handful that make life possible. Every other combination, no life happens. We seem to be specifically fine-tuned for something. If we come across this very intricate code that instructs every cell what to do, how to do, when to do it, and then say, oh, random accident. Whew. I don't have that kind of faith. If I find a code, if I find a design, there has to be a mind behind it. They say, some people say everything just randomly kind of developed. If you give enough time, everything can kind of randomly happen. Which, this has been said, it's the same argument as saying, if you put a typewriter in a monkey cage and give the monkey enough time, eventually, it might take 1 billion years, some monkey will randomly type Tolstoy's War and Peace. Except this would be more difficult than that. There have been times in history when there's been sudden emergence of all kinds of different life forms, sudden changes. And how do we account for the awareness of the other and awareness of God? Last thing, up until relatively recently, there were people who said, we have really no evidence that this guy named Jesus ever lived. It's just, he wasn't really there. He was kind of made up, and this stuff was kind of placed on him. That's not really true. Every historian agrees. Jesus existed. We find references to him in Tacitus, Josephus, Philo, plus all the gospel writers, plus Paul, plus a host of other pieces of literature. I mean, dozens of pieces of literature that aren't in our Bible. The same mention a guy named Pilate in the years of his terms. And no one says, oh, Pilate never existed. We have more existence by factors of hundreds on the existence of Jesus than the existence of Troy, because it was written about in the Odyssey. And yet people, we're looking for Troy. It's got to be here somewhere. And because Plato mentioned Atlantis, it's got to be here somewhere. And yet people, after hundreds and hundreds of references, would say Jesus didn't exist. We know that he did. Every historian agrees. You can read a book about people who disagree with Christianity on what Jesus was all about, violently disagree, but they will all say, no, Jesus existed. And we must evaluate what he said. In John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish. The second thing, Acts 4, verse 20. As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. In the early church, the disciples were pulled aside and said, you need to quit preaching, telling people this story. And their response was this: I'm not really making anything up. I'm just simply telling what we have seen and heard. You're asking us to deny reality. What I want to ask is, what is your story? I mean, what is your story in life? Maybe there's some great change. Oh, I was robbing banks once a week, and then Jesus, I doubt there's one of those. Maybe there was alcohol. Maybe there was drugs. Maybe there was serial relationships. Maybe you were despairing of life. And maybe that's not your story at all. I don't know. I had a wonderful family. I had a good childhood. My parents were faithful. Seemed good to me to follow in their footsteps. The faith became mine. It's a boring story. No one would be interested. I'm not sure about that. It'd be no less meaningful. I want you to think of your life just for a second. Make a timeline of your life. This is supposed to be a timeline over here. Think about what yours would look like. Like where you were born, maybe where you grew up. Think of those big moments of life. I mean, big moments where things turned a little bit. Mine would be born, At some point, a month later, I was adopted. Then about age 5, there's this big divorce. And then the decision to go to Olivet, which was huge because my life could have taken a different direction. And when I went to Olivet, I met this girl named Michelle, which has made a huge difference in life. Think about all those things in your life. Birth of children. I want to ask a question. How was God working in those moments? What was God doing behind the scenes? How was God using those bad times? How was God involved in the good times? How was He steering? I'm thinking about my life and how things could have gone badly. I'm thinking about their divorce and then Mom's decision to go back to her hometown, my dad's hometown, and these 2 grandparents. And what a difference one from each side really, really made. Huge difference. This desire, and I was looking at a lot of places. It was a point I just became just overwhelmingly convinced. I couldn't explain why, but I was supposed to go to Olivet. Now, it could be because I grew up 30 miles from Mount Vernon. And I've been to that campus, so that's maybe why. Sorry, if you're from Mount Vernon, wonderful place. Think about the time that maybe God pulls me away. God pulls me away always from pride. God pulls me away from self-centeredness. God pulls me away from anger. And everything that we do, and all of us, one common thing I think we have with Christianity is God always pulls us away from ourselves. I guess what I'm asking, you're someplace, you go in an elevator, the doors close, you're going up 6 floors, 8 floors, whatever, the doors close, someone asks you, maybe this will happen, probably not, but why do you believe in Jesus Christ? You got 30 seconds. What's your elevator pitch? You've heard that term. If you have 30 seconds with someone, what are you going to say? Oh, in those old days, we had a pamphlet and we could argue in the Roman road and we had all these things and take it through logically, but we have a whole world that doesn't see things like we do. And we might have to just say, come and see. Just walk with me for a while. Look what God has done in my life. 1 Peter 2:12. Live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. If we're going to spread the word today, it can't be divorced from the life that we live. When we don't have standing, when we don't have relationship, when our lives don't match up to our words, we don't get the avenue to speak into anybody else's life. And we do need to spread the news, but here's how we do it. We do it all the time. And I don't mean we're standing on the corner talking, but we live in such a way that we leave openings for these conversations to take place. Think how often you might meet someone at work, neighborhood, friendship. Did you have a good weekend? Oh, good weekend. Went out to eat, took the wife, or went out with my husband out to eat Saturday night. Where'd you eat? Oh, let me tell you about the place we ate. Think how often you did that. It was really good. Why? And you have 3 things. Boom, 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 boom. There's always room for those conversations. Men, we have different conversations. Oh, yeah. What'd you do? Had to drive back home. But let me tell you something. I beat my personal best time by a minute and a half. I got these lights green. I normally get them red. And I said, we get excited about dumb things. We cannot force our way into relationships with people. We cannot force words with people. We must have this relationship up front. This is not the path that we've taken. We always had, this pamphlet, and we would show people, Bible says this, Bible says that, Bible says this, which made a difference 50 years ago. But what do you do in a time and a place when a lot of people you talk to hold the Bible on an equal level with Time magazine? Or on an equal level, even worse, People magazine. Really? Oh, that's nice. I read about an actress in People who says that, she found her inner bliss. Okay. See, we're in a world that's holding those things to be equal. We're not going to shame them. We're not going to argue them. We're not going to convince them they're wrong. We're not going to, because our foundations are different. The Bible is meaningful for us because it's our book. First, I think we must show that we care. We must show that we love people. We must show that our walk and our talk matches. We must extend ourselves. We must extend our lives. The trouble is, when you extend your life, you're extending the chance that someone could reject you or tell you to get lost. And sometimes we all have that experience, and so we kind of hide that sore spot that got hit in the past, so we don't extend ourselves. Our lives should represent Christ well. And our words should match our steps. Notice I didn't say, be perfect. Sometimes that's what we hear. No, I think there's something else. I think we need to live openly. We need to love others. We need to not be quick to notice what someone else has done. We need to share and embrace and say kind words and just be there for others. And then when there's an opening, share when we're asked. That's why I would think about, I'd have a 30-second elevator speech ready to go at the drop of a hat. Now, we're all at different places. I tend to meet different people than probably you tend to meet. There is a place in some circles to talk about the proof of Jesus. There's a place to talk about God is the source of everything we see, not a random accident. There's room for all that. But I think a lot of people just want to know about why it's made a difference in your life. So again, my question is, what's your 30-second speech? So as I was thinking about this, I went, okay, that's really good, Pastor. Talk about the 30-second speech. I can't talk about a 30-second speech for you unless I'm willing to give you my 30-second speech. I think that's only fair. And I'm one of these people that I'm finding it much easier to go into a big philosophical, theological discussion and talk about scientific proof and start going down the academic route. That's just right in my wheelhouse, but that's not where most people are. And I realize that. So I have to alter. I have a couple. Let me give you the one that I think I'm asking you to think about. Someone comes in the elevator and says, you're a pastor, I see you go to church or whatever. Why should I follow Jesus? Why do you think that's the right way? Here's my 30-second speech. I don't know much for certain in life, but the one thing I do know is real is Jesus is real and has made all the difference in my life. God sustained me as a child, and in teen years when my mom struggled in a single-parent home and I saw His grace sustain my mom and give her strength in ways that she would not otherwise have. And I can tell you I know the value of a heavenly Father from the perspective of one who did not have a father in the home. He simply led me to a wonderful wife, a great family, and is changing an arrogant, sometimes self-righteous kid into an adult who was learning how to love. There's my 30-second speech. I don't know if it'll do any good, but that would be mine. Because I think there are times, I think the days of jumping at someone or throwing a pamphlet or leading someone through a book, I think are largely over. I just do, because we don't live in that world anymore. We're not sharing the same foundational ground. But I think there's people who long, who don't feel like they belong, who don't feel like anybody loves them, who don't feel like anybody cares about them, who need people to just step in. We can be those people. And I can get up and I can lecture about Big Bang, and I can lecture about the existence of Jesus and all that stuff. I don't think it'll do them any good. I think they want to know something much more foundational. That's my 30 seconds. I think there's always room to have something that we can give, that we can share, that we can embrace to people that allow us into their circle. I think that's what it looks like today. And I think when we do that, we can share our faith without crossing any boundaries. So the worship team come.